Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started in just a minute. We're going to let a few more people get in before we get started. If you have not already, grab your notebook and a pen so that you can take notes. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you who have just joined us, please grab a notebook and a pen. We've got a ton of good information coming to you. So welcome, everybody. We are really excited to have you with us today and share some valuable information. So I want to go ahead and give a quick shout out to Her Finance Network, who is sponsoring our event today. Her Finance Network is an organization who serves to bridge the financial knowledge gap for women with the goal of economic empowerment. They believe that connection and financial literacy are the key to achieving financial freedom and independence. So if you're joining us today, chances are that you are part of what is called the sandwich generation, meaning that you are caring for aging parents while also managing your own household, career, children, and financial responsibilities. And if that's you, you might be thinking things like, I want to help my parents, but I can't afford to derail my own future. I don't even know what questions I'm supposed to be asking. Or what happens if I wait too long and a crisis forces a decision? So for many families, downsizing a parent's home isn't just a real estate decision. It's emotional, it's financial, it's legal, and it is deeply personal. And too often, families are trying to navigate all of this reactively during a health scare or a moment of stress without a clear plan, without aligned professionals, and without protecting their own financial footing along the way. So that is exactly why we created today's session, the Sandwich Generation Solution, helping aging parents downsize without losing their financial footing. So between the five of us, a financial coach, an estate attorney, long-term care specialist, retirement coach, and realtor, we represent the core support team that families actually need during this transition. So together, we help families understand the financial reality of downsizing without sacrificing your own stability, putting the legal authority and protections in place before problems arise, navigating the emotional and identity shifts that come with leaving a long-time home, plan for care needs and future transitions, not just the next move, and create a clear execution plan so that decisions don't feel overwhelming or rushed. So over the next 40 minutes, we're going to guide you step by step so that you can feel more confident, more prepared, and less alone in the process. Our goal today is simple: to help you plan a smoother journey for your parents and for you. So let's begin. Hi, everybody. I'm Christina Grove. I'm a financial coach and consultant and the founder of Prosperity Grove. I help individuals, couples, and business owners make, save, spend, and invest their money with clarity and confidence. In my work, I see how money stress often shows up during life transitions, like what we're talking about today when families are caring for aging parents. So today, I am here to help you think about how to support your parents without quietly sacrificing your own financial stability so that this transition feels more intentional and less overwhelming. So one of the most important mindset shifts that families can make during this transition is understanding that there are two financial systems at play here, not just one. There's your parents' financial system, their income, assets, expenses, and care needs. And then there's your financial system, your household, your goals, your obligations, and your future. So problems start when those two systems quietly merge. So this usually happens in moments of urgency, like a health scare or a fall or needing to make a sudden move. The intention is love and protection, but financially the lines begin to blur. So I want you to hear me say, helping does not mean absorbing responsibility. So when the two systems collapse into one, adult children often become the backstop, covering gaps and carrying risk that was never meant to be theirs. So over time, this creates stress and resentment and financial strain for everyone involved. A healthier approach is clarity. Your parents' plan needs to stand on its own with transparency around what is sustainable, and your plan needs to stay intact because your financial stability is foundational. So this is not about being unsupportive. It's about designing a transition where both generations are protected. So when we respect the reality of two financial systems, decisions become calmer, conversations become clearer, and help become sustainable instead of draining. So before we talk about solutions, I want to name what is actually happening for most adult children, because this is where the financial stress quietly begins. So most money breakdowns don't come from poor planning necessarily. They come from good intentions combined with emotional pressure. So an adult child starts helping in small ways, covering a gap just this once, paying for moving costs, or just stepping in while a parent is figuring things out. And at first, this feels manageable. But then the help stretches, the timeline extends, and then suddenly money is flowing out without a clear plan or an endpoint. And this often looks like covering monthly shortfalls that were meant to only be temporary, paying transition costs without a cap, quietly absorbing costs to avoid family conflict. Does that sound familiar? Or pausing savings or retirement contributions just for a season. So none of this happens because you're irresponsible. It happens because emotion moves faster than planning. And when money doesn't have a boundary, it will always follow emotion. So these decisions don't just affect today, they compound over time. So they impact your emergency stability, your future security, and even your ability to help later if a bigger need arises. So if this feels familiar, hear this clearly. You're not doing it wrong. You're doing it without a structure. And the goal isn't to stop helping, it's to help in a way that keeps money flowing towards stability instead of stress. So before any family meeting or emotional conversation, there's one step that everyone can take that is going to make everything easier, and that is defining your financial capacity ahead of time. So most adult children go into conversations with good intentions, but they don't have any internal guardrails. And so these decisions get made in the moment under pressure, and then later the impact feels bigger than expected. So capacity isn't about what you want to give, it's about what you can give without harming your own financial foundation. So I encourage families to identify their 3 non-negotiables before talking about help. First is emergency stability. Helping should never drain your emergency fund or leave you vulnerable to your own unexpected expenses. Second is debt obligations. So you should not be taking on more personal debt like credit cards, loans, or co-signing anything just to make a transition work. And then third is long-term security. So helping today shouldn't mean sacrificing your future, which includes pausing retirement contributions or even abandoning long-term goals. So when you know your capacity in advance, your conversations are going to shift. You're no longer going to be reacting, you're going to be responding with clarity. And that clarity makes help sustainable for everybody involved. So one of the biggest fears that adult children have when they're setting financial boundaries is that they think they're going to feel selfish or that they're going to be damaging. So it's not the boundary itself that creates the conflict. It's the lack of clarity. So when expectations are unspoken, money decisions get loaded with guilt and resentment, whereas clear language actually reduces that tension. So instead of using language that sounds like rejection, like we can't afford that, or that's too much, try framing boundaries as protection for both generations. So, for example, you can say things like, we want to help within a clear budget so that it doesn't create stress for anyone. Or we're happy to support this transition in a way that keeps our finances stable. So this isn't about saying no, it's about saying yes with a structure. So boundaries don't mean that you care less, they mean that you're committed to making change sustainable. So I'm going to leave you with a simple decision filter for moments when emotions start to take over. So before saying yes, I want you to pause and ask yourself, is this planned or reactive? So are we making a choice because it aligns with a clear plan, or are we making it because it feels urgent in the moment? Second, does this protect both generations? So not just your parents today, but your household and your future as well. And then third, does money still flow towards stability and not stress? So if a decision continues to create ongoing strain, uncertainty, or resentment, it's a sign to pause. So if the answer to any of these is no, it doesn't mean that the conversation is over. It just means that your plan is not ready yet. So pausing is not failing. It is choosing clarity over chaos. And when decisions are made with intention instead of emotion, the entire transition becomes calmer for everyone. So once financial boundaries are clear, then legal authority ensures that those boundaries are respected, especially when emotions are running high.
Thank you, Christina. That's a great segue. My name is Lindsay Warnes, and I'm an estate planning attorney and one of the co-founders of Willow Legal Group. We focus solely on estate planning and elder law. And Christina talked a lot about clarity over chaos, and that's really our goal when we're talking with our clients about legal readiness. What does that mean, and why does that matter? Especially when we're talking about helping our older parents in the context of downsizing. So one of the things you can go ahead and switch. So what is legal readiness? It's helping without overstepping, but also having permission before a crisis. And so a common question a lot of adult children ask is, I want to help, but am I actually allowed to? And there is a fine line between, having permission from your parents to do things for them and committing fraud. So we want to make sure that we don't want to blur that line. So what legal readiness is not, is it's not taking control. You're not taking control from your parents, and you're not overriding their independence. What you're doing is putting a plan in place that gives you permission to help them when the time comes. And it allows that clarity before the crisis because, for example, if you have multiple children who are trying to help a parent, it makes it clear who the decision makers are so that kind of avoids a lot of the fighting that can happen if everybody's trying to help and there's disagreement. And that obviously will lead to less stress for everybody. So how do we do that? We do that by putting together your incapacity plan. And this includes your financial powers of attorney and your healthcare directives. Your financial powers of attorney gives somebody the authority to pay your bills on your behalf, to manage your accounts, to talk to anybody that they might need to on your behalf in a non-medical sense. And this could be anything from, going to the bank for you to signing the paperwork to sell the house. Or if you're moving into a long-term care facility or to another type of facility, signing on behalf of the parent for that as well. And then on the other side of that, we have your healthcare documents. And so these documents are extremely important because you are naming somebody to make healthcare decisions for you in the event that you cannot. And this is going to include speaking with doctors, deciding what treatment you might need. It could be everything from admitting you to the hospital to taking you out of the hospital. So really anything health related. And it also allows you to have authorized HIPAA representatives to receive information. So maybe not make decisions for you, but if you want to have other family members or friends be able to talk to the doctors. There are some hospitals that if you're not on this list, they kick you out of the waiting room and they won't talk to people. So you just want to make sure that everyone you want involved is able to get that information. Um, One of the things that I do find is if people wait too long and the person doesn't have capacity, different sense in what Christina was talking about. This capacity is your mental capacity, your ability to actually sign legal documents. These documents have to be signed while the person has clear capacity to make legal decisions. If we wait too late or too long and there's, memory issues, dementia, things like that, we can't really sign these documents, and that leaves the family with very few options, one of them being adult guardianship through the court process. So it's important to make sure that this stuff is done while capacity is clear. So once we have those in place, then we can talk about why do we, well, I talked a little bit about timing matters. So obviously, hospitalization might mean that you can't get to the bank on your behalf or on your own, and you need these people to have access for you. Um, and we just don't want to create any delays if somebody is laid up and you're trying to sell a house or do those other things. You can go to the next slide, thanks. Okay, so let's talk in context of downsizing. It's not just selling a house. It's also looking at your bank accounts, seeing what types of accounts we have. Do we want to consolidate, make things easier? And then there's also the legal aspect of signing the documents. So before we do anything to sell the house, and when we get to Andrea, she can maybe talk about this too, but it's really important to know who owns the house. Sometimes people are surprised when we look up their deed to their house and it's not titled the way that they thought. So we want to make sure that before we list it with an agent, who actually owns the home and who needs to sign the deed for that sale. What if it's in a trust? Perhaps your parents have set up a trust with an estate planning attorney. Is the house owned by the trust? If that's the case, who's the current trustee? Are the legal documents correct? There are mistakes on deeds all the time. And so just looking at all this information to make sure that everything is accurate before trying to go into this process is going to save a lot of headaches down the road. Some of the very common but fixable things that we see often is, again, waiting until it's too late. So you want to make sure before you make these big moves, you've got all of your ducks in a row. All of your documents are signed. We've got clear decision makers with clear authority. You don't ever want to assume that verbal permission is enough. Just because right now you can go to the bank with your parent and the bank will talk to you doesn't mean that the bank's going to talk to you if your parent's not with you. They shouldn't. So you want to just never make that assumption. You also want to make sure the documents are current. Some banks and some financial institutions won't even look at a document if it's more than 5 or 10 years old. So you want to try to make sure everything's fresh. We do recommend refreshing things every 5 years or so, just in case. And then as far as one child carrying everything alone, Christina talked a little bit about resentment. We do often see that one child takes on the main role of caretaking and handling everything, but where possible, try to spread that out among the children just so that you don't have that resentment and the burden for everybody. But again, knowing that you have clear authority set out in the documents to know who's responsible for what to protect those relationships and avoid resentment, not just the assets. And then now Suzanne's going to tell us what the next chapter could look like after you downsize.
Thank you so much, Lindsay and Christina, both of you. I love everything that you're saying. I think it's so smart to be thinking ahead. And I found myself in the situation with my parents where we were always reacting to a crisis, and I wish we had done things differently. And so I'm trying to help folks with the financial piece of that. And I love that we've got so many other pieces of the puzzle here that will help you if you're in this situation. So I'm Suzanne Shear. I'm an independent long-term care specialist, and I was formerly an attorney and stayed home for a very long time to take care of my parents during their long illnesses. And I'm really passionate about teaching people about long-term care insurance, how it works, and how it can play in to the downsizing and the decision of where you want to get care as you either age or have any kind of health issues. And we can go to the next one. Thank you. I, of course, want you to pay attention to everything that we're saying, but if all you take away from my part of it is one thing, I want you to understand that Medicare does not cover long-term care, nor does health insurance. when there are polls done routinely, 50% of people in this country think Medicare pays for long-term care. It'll only cover you shortly after hospitalization for a time, and then if you progress, then 80 days of rehab with a copay, and then after that, you're on your own. If you don't progress, you're on your own sooner. But people don't realize that there's this huge exposure out there. So basically, if you need care that's not medical in nature, which is what long-term care is, you're expected to pay for it yourself. And by way of example, there are two different triggers that create what's called a long-term care event. One trigger is if someone has a significant cognitive impairment. The other trigger is if someone can't perform 2 out of the 6 activities of daily living. These are the things that we do every day when we get ready to go out of the house, and we don't even really think about it when we're healthy. It's transferring, so getting out of bed, going to the bathroom, showering or bathing, getting dressed, eating, not cooking, but either feeding yourself or remembering to eat, and then maintaining continence throughout the day. So if someone can't do 2 out of the 6 of those activities of daily living, or they have a cognitive impairment, and whatever is causing this problem is expected to last at least 90 days, and that's considered a long-term care event. So if you had long-term care insurance, you could seek reimbursement for some of those expenses, and that could help pay for it. If you don't have long-term care insurance, your health insurance won't pay for it and Medicare won't pay for it, because none of the things I'm talking about are medical in nature. It's called custodial care. It's someone, you need a person to help you, but you don't necessarily need a nurse or a doctor. So because it's not covered by your insurance that you already have, if you would like to have a way to pay for this cost, should you find yourself in this situation, then that's where the long-term care insurance can come in. And if you can go on the next one. So if you have a policy, there are a couple of different triggers and a couple of different features that you would want to look at just to understand what it would be. So it will provide you with either a daily or monthly benefit, which is an amount you can access for care. Some policies have it where you get reimbursed and you have to use a licensed caregiver. Some of the other newer policies have it where you can just get a check every month and you can hire whoever you want. So you could hire a family member, or you could hire, someone from your church or synagogue, or you could choose who you want to hire. But so there are a lot of different options available now. The newer policies are all comprehensive, so they cover care at home, in a facility. They even have provisions for alternative forms of care, because I'm guessing they're thinking robots will be taking care of us one day. But so that's even considered in these policies. But that's one of the factors. There's an elimination period, which is how long you have to wait before you can start collecting money once you have a claim. And it varies. There's some policies with 0 elimination period. Others have 90 days as a common amount. And then also, what is the total amount that you can access for care if you needed it? It ranges all the way from several years to all the way to unlimited, depending on how your policy is structured. And then one thing that's really important is having inflation protection, because the cost of care is inflating faster than the rate of inflation. And so if you get a policy, let's say, that has a benefit of $6,000 a month today, that's not going to be very much 30 years from now for care. So you want to make sure that your policy has something that will help you with that. And if you can go to the next slide, that'd be great. Thank you. So if you have a policy yourself, or if you have a relative who has a policy, there are a couple of things you should do today to make sure that you can make the best use of it. The first thing is locating a copy of the policy. If you can't find it easily, you can just call the company with your loved one who has the policy and request a copy of the policy. That's number one. Do that one right away. When you're doing that, get an explanation of what the coverage is, because they might have gotten the policy 30 years ago when it was $100 a day. But if they have an inflation provision, maybe their benefit today is $400 a day. But you want to find out what's available and how that works. Is it for home care? Is it for facility care? The older policies are different. They have a different amount of benefit, maybe less for home care, more for facility. This can be really helpful if you are helping a parent downsize and let's say they want to go to an assisted living, or they want to go someplace else, because you'll know how much money you have to work with. You also want to make sure that there's a form in place that you have someone designated to receive a notice if your premiums are late. Sometimes folks get dementia, they forget to pay their premium, and then the policy can lapse. So you want to make sure that there's somebody designated to get a letter or notification if the premium hasn't been paid and there's a danger that the policy is going to lapse. So that's very important. And then you also want to have somebody designated to be able to call up and get information. If your loved one is in the hospital and they're not able to communicate with a long-term care insurance company, you want to be able to speak on their behalf. If you have a power of attorney, you can sometimes submit that in, and that process can take longer potentially. So if you can just have this form on file with the insurance company saying, that you're authorized to call and inquire about the policy and act on behalf of your parent or whoever the policyholder is, that can make things a lot easier. One thing to find out when you're asking about the benefits is, I don't think many people know about, some policies have a provision where you can get reimbursed for home modifications. So let's say your parent wants to stay in their house, or they want to they want to downsize, but they want to be in a place other than a facility, and perhaps there are stairs or there are other problems with that location. If you have a reimbursement through your policy for home modifications, you could put in a stair lift or a ramp or grab bars or different things to make wherever it is they're living safer for them. So find out if your policy has that home modification reimbursement, because that's something that's built into the policy that can be very helpful. If you're going to get to the point where your loved one is needing care, like I said, they either have the cognitive impairment or they can't do 2 out of the 6 activities of daily living. A couple of tips for actually making a claim. If possible, if you're lucky enough that they don't need to go to a facility right away, if you can start the care journey with home care, that can be a good option because the cost of home care is a lot less than the cost of a facility. And you could potentially just get a small amount of care. Let's say someone's just starting to need help with some things. Maybe they're unsteady and they might need help, someone just to stand by while they're showering or getting dressed. Maybe have someone come in 4 hours a day, or depending on how the policy is worded, sometimes they look at calendar days for the elimination period. Sometimes they'll look at service days. But if you can start off with maybe a small amount of care at home until you satisfy that waiting period, then by the time they're ready to go to a facility, that will have been satisfied and they'll have their full benefit available to them to use to pay for the facilities. Because if you haven't already looked, it's quite costly for these facilities. Another thing that's really helpful is to make sure that your loved one's doctor has notes of the challenges that they're having, so that when the insurance company is assessing the claim, they can see that there are notes on file that either there's a cognitive impairment or there are difficulties with those activities of daily living. And then also, if a claim gets denied, there are folks who will help with the claim, appealing the claim, and they can go back and argue with the insurance company and help you figure out what needs to be fine-tuned so that you can make sure everything's in place so that you can have a claim go through successfully. But don't just take no for an answer if they say your claim is denied, because you've been paying into the policy for so many years. And assuming you've met the criteria, you should be able to get access to your policy. So those are just a couple of the tips. And I would highly recommend, working with individuals to get everything in place, everything from the estate planning with Lindsay or working with Christine about the boundaries. And Joy is going to talk next about some of the emotional aspects that come along with that. I didn't even get a chance to touch on that too much, but take it away, Joy. Can't hear you.
That's because I was muted. So thanks so much. And, I'm listening to all of this great information, and I just keep thinking, I wish I had heard this like 5 or 6 years ago before I had to deal with all of this stuff. So this is so powerful, and it's easy to think, oh, I'm going to know what to do in that instance, but a lot of things are happening at once. So it's so great to hear all of this stuff. So I'm Joy Levin. I am a professional retirement coach. I work on the non-financial aspects of retirement, and those are as important as the financial. When retirement was designed, it was like a 5-year thing, and now it's almost 10 times that amount of time. So I work with Gen X and late career boomers, executives and business owners who are getting ready to step back from full-time work or getting ready to sell their business. And we use tools and exercises to design a next chapter with intention and confidence. So go to the next slide. So my role is really focusing on the decision-making piece that often really gets overlooked. There's the financial, the legal, the housing guidance, which are all really, really essential. And the presenters today are providing such valuable information. But what I find happens is people need a framework to make decisions based on all of this information. And these decisions aren't really clearly framed early on. So this is the point where I sometimes get involved, where adult children are trying to stay involved without doing some of the things that, like Christina mentioned, without taking over, without exerting control, because everyone wants decisions that are not going to unravel later. So what we do is we work with families to avoid, just getting overwhelmed and having this tension and repeat crises that tend to come up over and over. Next slide. So, downsizing is a very, very emotional decision. And there are a lot of reasons because of that. There's too many options, there's too many opinions. It can be multiple siblings, it can be, adult children and other relatives. They're the parents' siblings. So, and it can also just be, not having enough clarity. But what actually creates paralysis is unclear decision making. Because when families start looking at options before they're aligned on priorities, every choice ends up feeling risky, and you'll find conversations looping around endlessly, and progress slows. And that progress, that pace of progress, like Lindsay was saying, is so important that you want to take care of things while the person still has capacity, while, early on, so that you have all the options that you need. So I always encourage people to really talk carefully through priorities and get alignment. And then conversations around options tend to get a lot more productive. And what's important is to choose the right next place and also get clear on what decisions should be based on. Figuring out, okay, let's talk about the actual pieces and go through those. So next slide. So, what should be involved in establishing these priorities? Most families start feeling with, we just want something easier. I know we felt the same way when we were going through this. It's just so complicated. You just want something easier. But everything feels complicated, and easier just feels like a relief. So that makes sense, but it's not specific enough to guide decisions. Progress happens when that wish gets translated into priorities. So it's saying things like, okay, what actually matters the most? What's flexible and what's non-negotiable, and what would not work even when it looks good on paper. So when those priorities are clear, the decisions will move faster, and second guessing ends up dropping dramatically. Next slide. So this is where many Gen X and late boomer adult children really start to feel the strain. You're close enough to be involved, but again, you're just not meant to be in charge. And when that role is unclear, either people end up overstepping or disengaging entirely. I have seen many people say, you know what, I'm throwing up my hands, I just can't deal with it. Both of those, the overstepping and the disengaging, create a lot of tension. There's a family situation right now where the older parent really is just not maybe able to make any decisions. And so people are overstepping all over each other. There are like 6 siblings. And so you can imagine it's a mess. So the most effective role is not fixing everything. It's helping to keep decisions structured and contained and aligned with the priorities that were already agreed upon. So next slide. So another common trap is then focusing only on getting through the move. Decisions made for short-term relief can unintentionally create new urgency later. So it can end up with more moves, more stress, and fewer options. So asking a few longer-term questions early helps families avoid these repeat crises and rush decisions down the road. So the goal here isn't perfection, it's durability. It's like that sustainability that Christina talked about. So it's asking, All right, let's look at this move we're talking about. Does this preserve some feeling of independence? Does it keep options open? I love the thing Suzanne brought up, where maybe you need a little bit of care now, but maybe more later. And so, what can we do now that will keep options open? And does it reduce pressure on the family overall? Lindsay talked about siblings stepping all over each other and having conflict. So what can we do now that will reduce pressure on siblings, on the whole family later on? Next slide. So when priorities are clear, roles get understood, long-term impact is considered, and everything else becomes a lot easier. Financial planning ends up holding up better. You end up having to redo things, which can be very, very expensive. And legal steps will align more smoothly, and housing decisions, which Andrea is going to talk about next, will move forward with far less friction. One thing I'd like to leave you with is this. Families don't get stuck because they don't care. They get stuck because everything ends up feeling urgent at once. So when you slow it down, name what really matters, and decide what is non-negotiable, the next step tends to feel a lot more manageable. So now Andrea is going to walk you through how that clarity that we've all been talking about can turn into real world housing options and execution, because when decisions are clear, movement will follow. So take it away, Andrea.
Thank you, Joy. I'm Andrea Howe with the Maryland Home Group of Remax Results. I'm a realtor, but also a senior real estate specialist. Go ahead for the next slide, Christina. One of the things that we need to remember, and I will echo a lot of what has been said, is that we don't want to rush into any decisions. And one of the reasons that elderly parents tend to not want to move is because they don't understand all of their options. They feel very, very overwhelmed. So I tell them, don't start by decluttering the house, making any rash decisions. Bring in a realtor to talk about what their options are. A lot of elderly people just want to right size. Maybe they have a two-story house or a large house and they need something smaller with less maintenance. Maybe they want to age in place. If the house is still affordable, maybe you can make lighting upgrades, wear a medical device that lets people know when you fall. You can get tubs that you can walk into. They have little doors. And is that realistic? Maybe they would like to move into a senior community or move in with their kids, if that is a realistic goal. But what we need to look at is, again, like Joy was saying, long term, what is realistic financially? Even though this is a very emotional decision, I find that if we look at the cost, how much equity is in the house? How much would it cost to sell? How much would it cost to move? How much would upgrades that allow aging in place, how much would that cost? Does it make sense to go into a community early on because they do tend to be more expensive? You want to move the next slide, Christina? So once all of that has been decided, you really want to pick your direction first. One move beats two. This is a mistake I made with my father, where we just moved him here because he needed to be closer. He had Parkinson's and I needed to take care of him, but I had no place to bring him. So we sold his house, moved him here, and then what? And he unfortunately was stuck in a hotel for a little while because it took time for us to buy another house. So pick your direction first. Maybe if moving to a smaller house, let them look at some houses before they actually put their house on the market. Once that direction is picked, if they do want to move forward, move downsize, move closer to family, you want to talk to somebody like Lindsay about gathering all the documents, making sure that the correct people are signing, making sure that you know exactly what the financial numbers look like before you move on. Then, and only then, do you start making a move plan. Are you going to stay while you're selling? This is sometimes very difficult because elderly people don't like having people in and out of their house to show. Will you move and then sell meaning that you already move into the kid's house or into the other house. There are bridge loans that allow you to do that. Or you're going to do kind of a combination where maybe you move part of your things out of the house to make it look emptier, but you stay in place. Next slide, please. Once we have made the decision to move, you've talked to the realtor, that and only then do you make the decluttering decisions. Now, I have actually come up with a guide called Decluttering with Dignity because this is where you get the most friction, I think, in families. For me personally, I was clashing with my father because he wanted to bring everything from Texas to Maryland, which is not realistically feasible or wasn't at the time. And so I ended up, instead of fighting with him all the time, brought in a friend's college age kid to kind of go through all of the things with him. Um, Use a zone approach. Do not look at the whole house. It will overwhelm you. One room, one area, maybe a closet at a time. Keep it to 30 to 45 minutes. And if you have family members that can help or friends, have them tell the story. Sometimes letting go has nothing to do with they really actually want to keep it. They don't want to let go of the memory. So sometimes taking a picture and having a short, maybe a voice clip for 60 seconds or a little video of them explaining what that legacy is allows them to gift it to somebody else. Um, Usually, I would say have one memory trunk limit, meaning that you want them to pick their absolutely favorite things to bring with them, kind of like curating a museum. And when they are specifically thinking about that and only have a limited time, then those special things become more special because most things are packed away. With my father, I actually asked him what was in the attic because he wanted to see all of it. And I said, if you can tell me what's in the attic, I will bring it down. And he did not remember. So he was okay with just leaving it there because he hadn't seen it in probably 20 years. Anyway, it does take time. And that's when you want to call us in earlier because sometimes we can actually talk to your parents and get past that icky period of I don't want to move, I'm going to lose my autonomy. I don't know what to do with all the things. It's overwhelming because we can come in as somebody outside of the family and have the voice of reason. Anyway, if you have any interest in the decluttering with dignity, let me know. Back to you, Christina.
All right. Thank you, everybody. So we did have a couple questions come in. However, for the sake of time, we did want to make this really quick and impactful for everybody. So I've taken a snapshot of those questions and we will reach out to you personally with the answers to those. So we hope that you are walking away today with something valuable that you're able to start implementing right away. If you find yourself wanting or needing more support, we encourage you to like and follow Her Finance Network on Facebook and Instagram. You can check back for more events that might interest you. If you are looking for more one-on-one support, or if you have any questions, you can send us a private message on Facebook or Instagram, and we will connect you to the specialist in the area that you need. Thank you so much for being with us today, and don't forget to look for more events and details from Her Finance Network. Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye.